Welcome back. This is week 14 of Fantasy Central. This is your host, Zach, and I'm here with our very own fantasy expert, the fantasy football guru himself, Jeffe.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? How we doing?
I hope they're doing better than I'm doing. I am pretty much eliminated in both of my leagues. I have a 6% chance and one of them 0% chance, and the other came through towards the end of the season, man. Finally got healthy, finally had stacked teams, but I just cannot do it because everybody seems to put up the best game of the season on me every single week. I just don't understand, but that's how my fantasy season has gone all season long. How'd you do this last weekend?
This week I finally got a win. It was against somebody who, didn't have the greatest team, didn't have the greatest season, but he got some guys back over the last few weeks. He won like 3 games coming into it. So getting a win after like 9 straight losses or whatever it was felt really nice.
Well done. Very well done. All right. Shout out to all of our WUBI Live radio listeners as the Horsemen Pro Football Talk with Jeffe and I just finished up. And here you are sticking it out, talking some fantasy football with your boys. For all of you not listening on WUBI, you can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk and Fantasy Central back to back on WUBI Live Radio. The app is available for free in your app store, or you can head over to WUBI.live where you can find more information and also stream directly from your browser. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, or simply listening on your favorite podcast platform, hit that like, share, subscribe button and help us out. One simple, quick gesture goes a very long way, and we really appreciate it. This is week 14, the final regular season matchup for the 2021 fantasy football season. Next week, the playoffs begin. Whether you've punched your ticket already, you're fighting with one last hope to get in, or completely eliminated altogether like myself, Jeffe and I are here to give you a leg up so you come out on top this weekend. As always, Jeffe is going to run down some guys that may be available out there on the waiver wire, followed by his top 10 fantasy running backs and wide receivers for week 14. And as always, we will finish up with my surefire week 14 stardom or sit'em. Both of us hit on almost all of our predictions last week, and we have no plans of stopping now. So let's do it. Are you ready, Jeffe?
Yep, I'm ready to get into it, man.
All right. The Dolphins, the Patriots, the Eagles, and our beloved Indianapolis Colts are all on the super late week 14 bye this week, which, if you guys haven't heard Jeffe's opinion on that, check out our latest episode of the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast. 4 teams on the bye this weekend. You're in need of a solid replacement on the wire. Who are you targeting this week?
So going to start with some wide receivers here. First is going to be KJ Osborne, a guy that if you've listened to either of the podcasts this year, I really like KJ Osborne, especially, this week's episode of the Horseman Pro Football Talk. I talked about KJ Osborne and how much I like him. I think he can be a valuable asset. When he's had his playing time, he's produced on the field. And in fantasy, if he gets 5 catches in a game, this year, he gets at least 15 fantasy points in those games. So I think KJ Osborne needs to be rostered in every league. With a high ankle sprain, it could be multiple weeks that Adam Thielen is out. So if there's a chance that KJ Osborne is available in your league, which he probably is because the last, before this last week, I think there was, 5 or 6 games where he hadn't really done anything. He's probably out there. Go ahead, pick him up. He's going to be very valuable for you for the next couple weeks. Probably going to help some people squeak into the playoffs, if I had to guess. Next wide receiver is going to be Van Jefferson, who's wide receiver 40 on the year. This last game, he had 16.1 fantasy points, and he has really stepped up since Robert Woods went out. He's been getting, Robert Woods type of production. Woods wasn't going crazy. Everybody knows the star of that offense is Cooper Kupp, and he gets a lot of catches, a lot of the yards, a lot of touchdowns. But Van Jefferson, even with Odell Beckham Jr. there, and almost playing better ever since Odell Beckham Jr. got there. He's had an expanded role since the Woods injury, and he's been producing. So he needs to be in somebody's flex in every single league. So Van Jefferson, the second wide receiver. Third one's going to be Devonte Parker, coming back off this injury and going into one of the most pass-happy offenses in the league. And this is a guy that I don't expect to be a whole lot more than like a flex option week to week. But because they're so pass-happy, there should be enough targets for him to be able to produce. You're going to have, Jalen Waddle, who is in the top 5 in the NFL in receptions this season. So he's going to see a lot of targets and probably continue to. Gesicki's going to see targets, but having Devonte Parker there, they're going to need him if they want to keep winning ball games. When they go down the stretch and have to play a couple tougher teams. So Devonte Parker, another guy that needs picked up.
Absolutely. So that is 3 wide receivers you were targeting this week on the wire. That is KJ Osborne, Van Jefferson, and Devonte Parker with the Miami Dolphins. I also understand you have 3 running backs you want to talk about that could be out there on the wire this week.
Yeah, and we've talked about all 3 of these guys before. Adrian Peterson, we brought him up when he joined the Titans because, he's going to get the goal line touches. It's just, what he's been in his career over the last few teams when he lands from team to team. So Adrian Peterson, if he's out there, especially in standard leagues, he's probably, more valuable because of the touchdown value that he has. But if you have injuries, bye weeks are about to not be a thing. But Jonathan Taylor's on a bye, the Eagles running backs are on a bye, Patriots running backs are on a bye. So if you need somebody to slot in there, Adrian Peterson probably going to get you a touchdown this week with the Seahawks playing the Texans. And these next 2 guys, we talked about them last week, but the Titans were on a bye. So I want to go ahead and bring them back up. That's Dontrell Hilliard and D'Onta Foreman. In the last game, he played more. He touched the ball more, but Hilliard had more production. He's the pass-catching back. And, they're playing the Jags, so how much will they need to use him? Not real sure. I guess that still kind of depends on the wide receiver situation. As Zach said on the Pro Football Talk episode from this week, it looks like Julio may be back. We're still waiting to see what happens with A.J. Brown. But, both of them are good options again with all the bye week running backs this week and the injuries that have happened. Foreman has a lower cap in my opinion, and Hilliard, if I had to choose between them, would be the one that scores you more points.
Heard that. Yeah, definitely Adrian Peterson. I almost added him into my must starts this week. I like the matchup. I definitely think he'll get in there. And I can't argue with the other 3 guys that you're talking about there on the waiver wire. That is Adrian Peterson, Dontrell Hilliard, and D'Onta Foreman as his running backs that he is targeting on the wire this week. So if you're in need of a wide receiver or a running back, take a look for one of these guys. They'll be a nice fill-in for you this week in fantasy football. So, all right, let's transition over to Jeffe's top 10 running backs for week 14 of the fantasy football season. As always, we're going to start at number 10 here. Who you got at number 10?
Number 10 is going to be Antonio Gibson going up against Dallas Cowboys, who are actually 6th in terms of fantasy against running backs, but with the way Washington's been playing, the way they control the ball, Antonio Gibson's been balling out. Overall, that offensive line got healthy through the bye week, and ever since then, I mean, they've been using the run game to control the clock. And Antonio Gibson's going to keep seeing the rock a bunch, especially with J.D. McKissic being out. You're going to see Antonio Gibson get a lot more passing game work too. So I could see him being higher, but I want to see it first. And, in these Washington games, possessions are limited, so opportunities are limited, but I think that there's enough value there between the run game and the pass game for Antonio Gibson to come out as a top 10 back. I put him at number 10 for week 14. Number 9 in week 14, I think, is going to be Saquon Barkley. And I know this one, probably sounds like a long shot. You hear Saquon, you just don't think this season what you had thought about him in the past. But he's going up against the Chargers this week. They have Jake Fromm starting at quarterback, his first start. So, they're going to want to lean on their stars. It's yet to be seen if any of the receivers are coming back. You would hope that Sterling Shepard and Tony can be there to be some help to this offense that can't seem to figure out how to score touchdowns. So I think they're going to have to lean on Barkley this week. They drafted him at number 2 overall. They need him to be the star they drafted him to be if they have any chance of winning and trying to stay in that playoff picture in the NFC. So Saquon, I think, has a nice day here against the Chargers, who are 27th against running backs. He comes in at 9 for me. Number 8 is Cordell Patterson against Carolina, who's second against running backs. But with the way Cordell Patterson's used, I don't think matchups matter at this point. He just played the Bucks, who are very good run defense, and Cordell Patterson, remember, is a receiver that has transitioned to a running back this season, and he balled out on the ground. He had his passing game value like he always does, but he did very well on the ground against the Bucks, and I think that should be noted. That's the toughest matchup for running backs. Going up against the second toughest matchup for running backs here, I don't think it's going to be a problem. Will he score? I don't know. He may come out and just have a bunch of catches in this game. I don't know what the game flow here. This is one of the most unpredictable games of the weekend. I don't know how the game will go, but Cordell Patterson has his value. He's been a great back every week. He is number 8 for me in week 14.
Yeah, to kind of hit on that, I will talk about another guy who is on the Atlanta Falcons. However, I have that guy on my sit list for this week. We'll get to that later. But I did note that I'm pretty much sitting anybody in the Atlanta Falcons unless your name is Cordero Patterson, because at this point, I agree. I think he is definitely matchup proof. And then Sequon Barkley, I have him as number 1 on my must start running backs this week. The Chargers are giving up 141 yards per game, which ranks 31st in the league. They're also giving up 17 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is 30th in the entire NFL. With Saquon Barkley still trying to ramp back up to his former glory, and with him taking 2/3 of the volume last week, I don't see any reason why Saquon can't have a big game here on the ground alone. You add in his passing value there, and those fantasy points are definitely going to rack up. So I like that too. Antonio Gibson, I haven't really been on the Gibson train, but he has been playing very well lately for the Washington football team, who are on a 4-game win streak, and they're looking pretty damn good. So I can see Gibson coming in, especially against that Dallas defense, and doing pretty well this weekend. So Antonio Gibson at 10, Saquon Barkley at 9, Cordero Patterson at 8, and who do you have at number 7?
All right, number 7 this week is going to be James Conner going up against the Rams, who are middle of the pack, 16th against running backs in terms of fantasy. And it looks like Chase Edmonds has a chance to come back this week, so that might eat into some of the production from James Conner. But this is a game where I think the Cardinals get up. I think they're going to want to show some dominance against a division opponent. This is a game that both teams really need to be able to win. And the Cardinals have been the better team, and I think they're going to be the better team on Sunday. And James Conner is going to be a beneficiary of that. He's not the only Cardinal that I have in one of these top 10 lists. I think it's going to be a dominant showing for them. So James Conner, probably going to get in the end zone here, have a top 10 week. He comes in at 7 for me in week 14. Number 6 here is going to be Chuba Hubbard going up against Atlanta. And most weeks I probably won't have Chuba here because that offense, especially I want to see what they look like after a bye, for sure. So this is definitely speculative ad, but assuming they can be an NFL offense, Chuba Hubbard going up against Atlanta is a good matchup. Atlanta's 26th in the NFL against running backs for fantasy, and taking over for CMC, we've seen it be fruitful for running backs in the past. So Chuba Hubbard, I just felt like he earned a spot in here, just basically for the role he's taken over against a bad matchup. So he is number 6 for me in week 14.
Yeah, both of these guys are filling in nicely as the lead backs. It is kind of a speculative pick, but I do think he will produce, even with this offense trying to look like an NFL offense. It seems like him or CMC, whoever's in there, still gets the value when it comes to fantasy. So I can't disagree with you there. And you know how I feel about James Conner. I had him on one of my teams this year, and he's absolutely balled out, looked like one of the better backs in the league. So no doubt he deserves to be there in your top 10. So with that said, let's move on to your top 5 here for running backs, and we'll start with number 5.
All right, number 5 is going to be Elijah Mitchell for the 49ers going up against Cincy, who are 25th in the league against running backs. And we know the Niners like to run the ball. This one's, pretty simple. The Bengals, they week to week, we don't know what we're going to get with them. Sometimes their defense balls out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think the Niners, when it comes to Kyle Shanahan and that run game, they're going to be able to dominate. And so I expect them to do that this week, especially coming off of a loss that they just had. They want to stay in that playoff picture. They're the number 7 seed in the NFC right now. They need to win if they want to stay in that picture, because there are a lot of teams that are bunched up between 6 and 10 in that conference. So I expect Elijah Mitchell to have a heavy workload this week and make the most of it. He comes in as a top 5 for me in Week 14. The next one here is going to be Alexander Madison for the Minnesota Vikings going against Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 20th in the NFL against running backs in terms of fantasy football. And this one speaks for itself, right? He's going to be the workhorse back with Dalvin out again. He had a pretty good game. The Vikings lost to the freaking Lions, but Alexander Madison still had more than 20 points, and you can't ask for better than that. I expect him to have a nice day here against Pittsburgh. It's a Thursday game. Doesn't look like Cam Hayward is going to be available for them, for the Steelers, and that's going to be a big deal. So I think Alexander Madison is going to have a top 5 week, comes in at number 4 for me for Week 14. Number 3 for me, we're going to stay in that game on Thursday. It's going to be Naji Harris, who had a pretty disappointing week for what he normally puts out. But going up against Minnesota here, Minnesota just they can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass when they need to. The defense has not been good recently. I know they just activated Patrick Peterson off of the reserve COVID list, but does that matter? I don't think so. When he's there, it's not like that defense is a whole lot better. They've had some issues with the defensive line recently. We all know what happened there. So, I just hasn't looked good for Minnesota's defense. So I think Najee Harris will be one of the main benefactors that he comes in at 3 for me.
Yeah, I think he'll have a huge game. I was going to put him on my start list, but it's Najee Harris. He's going to be starting for your team every single week. I think he will have a monster game against the Minnesota Vikings. And keeping it in that same game with Alexander Madison, who you have at number 4, I have him on my start list this week. With Dalvin Cook out, Madison has proven his value in the Vikings backfield this year. 3 games with full workload, and Alexander Madison has produced over 20 fantasy points in each of those games. This week, he has another favorable matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, like you were talking about. I have Alexander's floor at 20, but don't be surprised if he tops 30, especially with Adam Thielen being out. So no doubt, Alexander Madison in the top 4 of your top 10 running backs this week. All right, with that said, let's move on to number 2 here.
All right, number 2 is going to be Alvin Kamara, who sounds like he's definitely going to be coming back, going up against the Jets, who are last in the league in terms of fantasy football against running backs. And that obviously is going to be key here. It's a great matchup. The Jets have been a very bad defense as of late, over the last, month and a half or so. Especially after Marcus May went out, their whole defense just basically tanked when he tore his Achilles. And Alvin Kamara coming back has to be a big part of that offense if they want to win. With the deficiencies they've had on offense, especially with him out, I expect him to be a huge part of the offense, bunch of catches, enough running yards in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if he has over 200 total scrimmage yards in this game and a couple touchdowns. They're good. They're going to need him to play big if they want to stay in that playoff picture. So he comes in at number 2 for me in Week 14, and number 1. Unfortunately, could not be Jonathan Taylor because he is on a bye. So it is going to be Austin Eckler going up against the Giants, who is a wonderful matchup. They're 29th in terms of fantasy football against running backs. And, I just think they're going to want to use the stars. to win the games. They have to stay in the playoff picture. They're up there right now. They just had a good win against Cincinnati. They have to be able to beat bad teams. It scares me a little bit because the Chargers themselves have been pretty inconsistent, so you never really know what you're going to get. But you know what you're getting out of Austin Eckler pretty much every week. So this one kind of pretty self-explanatory, the value that he brings, and I think the number 2 running back in fantasy is number 1 in Week 14.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with either one of these guys, Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler. Unfortunately, like you said, Jonathan Taylor is sitting out this week on the bye. So no doubt those two guys, they've been the best to do it the last few years. Well deserved to be up in 1 and 2. So can't go wrong there. Do you want to summarize your top 10 real quick for everybody listening?
Yep. So top 10 for Week 14 in fantasy is going to be number 10, Antonio Gibson against Dallas. Number 9, Saquon Barkley against the Chargers. Number 8, Cordero Patterson against the Panthers. Number 7, James Conner against the Rams. Number 6, Chuba Hubbard against Atlanta. Coming into the top 5 is Elijah Mitchell against Cincinnati. Number 4 is Alexander Madison against Pittsburgh. Number 3 is Naji Harris against Minnesota. Number 2 is Alvin Kamara against the Jets. And number 1 is Austin Eckler against the Giants.
There you have it, Jeffe's Week 14 top 10 running backs for fantasy football. Let's move on over to his top 10 wide receivers. And, of course, we will start here at number 10.
Yeah, that's right. Number 10. I told you I had another Cardinal in the top 10 list. This is where it is. It's DeAndre Hopkins going up against the Rams, or 22nd in the NFL in terms of fantasy football when it comes to receivers. And so, it's a better matchup than we would have expected. But here's why I have DeAndre here. I don't think they're going to shadow DeAndre with Jalen Ramsey. They didn't do that to Devante Adams. I don't think they're going to do it to DeAndre Hopkins. Jalen, that defense plays better when Jalen's playing more in the slot and being more involved with everything. So I think DeAndre Hopkins has more than enough opportunity to show his greatness. I've heard some people say he's been touchdown dependent, and this year he has. But I think in a big game that the Cardinals know they need to win, this is where DeAndre Hopkins is going to show why he has been the best wide receiver in football for the last 6-7 years now. So DeAndre comes in at number 10 for me this week. Could be higher, but there are like 6 other receivers and 2 running backs that they use in the passing game. So he comes in at 10 for me. Number 9, Elijah Moore going up against the Saints, who are 28th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers. And this is another guy who seems matchup proof. Ever since he started to heat up, it doesn't seem like he's cooling off. He's a big part of that offense. He's going to remain a big part of that offense because they're going to be down in pretty much every game. So as long as the game script is going to be, positive in the way of fantasy football for Elijah Moore, then I would expect Elijah Moore to continue to be a top 10 wide receiver week to week. I have him at number 9 this week going up against the Saints, number 8 this week. Barring the fact that he plays, I've heard that there's a chance that he's able to play. They're hoping that that was a false positive. And we saw this past week T.J. Watt had the positive test on a Monday. By Saturday afternoon, he was cleared to play on Sunday. So this is kind of a if he plays kind of deal. But if he plays, Keenan Allen going up against the Giants are 19th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers. And this is one of those, just like Austin Eckler, he's just too big a part of that offense not to be up here week to week. At the beginning of the year was Mike Williams having a lot of value, and Keenan Allen was getting between 8 and 15 points from week to week. But Keenan Allen is over the last 6-7 weeks has been Keenan Allen again. He's getting a bunch of targets every week, and he produces when he needs to. A 2-touchdown game. You love to see that for any receiver. Wouldn't expect that to be every week, but going up against the Giants, there's definitely a chance he gets in the end zone if he plays. Again, this is all if he plays. He's currently on the reserve COVID list, but hoping he can do what T.J. Watt did last week and be ready for Sunday.
Noted. Yeah, I like all 3 of those guys. Definitely favorable matchups. I really like DeAndre Hopkins. He's one of my favorite receivers in the league. I think he'll step up, have a huge game against a divisional foe in the Los Angeles Rams, which is a pretty big game because if the Rams win that, they'll be within, I believe, a game of the Cardinals. So DeAndre Hopkins, he likes to show up in prime time. You said that a few weeks ago, and what he do? He showed up in prime time. So love DeAndre Hopkins this week against the Rams. Elijah Moore's been balling out. Favorable matchup against the New Orleans Saints. And Keenan Allen, if he plays, I do like him against the Giants because the Giants are just complete dog shit on all facets of the game.
Yes, they are.
All right. With that said, let's move on to number 7.
All right, number 7 for Week 14 for wide receivers is going to be Terry McLaurin going up against Dallas, who is 26th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers. And this is another one, just like Antonio Gibson, opportunities are going to be limited, but in a big game against Dallas where there might be a point where they're down in this game. But I think Terry McLaurin is going to be used a lot. They're going to have to use their stars if they want to beat a good team. They have to gain ground against Dallas in that division. They're 2 games back right now. So Terry McLaurin, I think he's going to have a big game. He's probably going to be a big part of the game plan. And, Trayvon Diggs, he's gotten a lot of interceptions this year, but we've seen him get burned plenty of times this year as well. I think Scary Terry can burn pretty much anybody in the league. So I think he has a top 10 week. He comes in at number 7 for me. Number 6 is going to be Tyree Kill. Going up against the Raiders here, division rivalry game. The Raiders are 6th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers. And, this last week against Denver, we knew it was going to be a tough matchup. It's the Broncos, but the Chiefs offense didn't have to do a whole lot because the Broncos offense didn't do anything. And, Tyreek coming off of a bad game usually has an explosion. And, the Chiefs, if they want to keep pace with what the Patriots are doing right now, they have to win. And I think they're going to want to use Tyreek and Travis Kelce a lot this week. And I could definitely see this being a Tyreek explosion game. So I have him coming in at number 6 for Week 14.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill is one of those guys, matchup proof, more than capable of breaking out for an 80-yard strike at any given moment. He definitely does that more often than not. So I think he will put it together this week as well. And same thing with Terry McLaurin here. I haven't been on the Terry McLaurin bandwagon, but he's been playing very well this year, and I love the matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. He should have a huge game. I was actually going to put him on my must starts, but left him off this week in favor of a couple other guys who are a little bit more underrated than him. But no doubt he should have a good game. And so that puts us here in your top 5, and we'll start with number 5.
All right. Coming into the top 5 for Week 14 is going to be Stefon Diggs going up against the Buccaneers, who are 18th in the league against wide receivers. And, this one, especially coming off this Patriots game, now that we know the result of that and what happened, they're going to have to come out and pass the ball because they're still not great at running the ball. They just can't get it done on the ground. And coming into this game, it's going to be a big one. They just went down to the Patriots a couple games. They're basically, out of the division race unless something crazy happens there. So if they want to stay in that wild card picture and stop themselves from sliding, they're going to need to lean on their stars to try to win this game. Stefon Diggs is going to be a big part of that. And, I know that Buccaneers secondary has been getting healthier. That defense has been getting better as these guys get healthy. But Stefon Diggs, we're talking about him. They know they need to get him more involved. They couldn't do it on Monday night because of how the weather was, but they're going to be playing in Tampa. It's going to be real nice weather down here when they come to play the Bucs. So Stefon Diggs and Josh Allen, I think, are going to have a nice night here. He comes in as an option. Coming in at number 4 for me this week is going to be Justin Jefferson going up against the Steelers, who are 23rd in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And with Adam Thielen out, even though I think KJ Osborne is going to see a decent amount of targets, and he's a good option to have. This offense throws a lot this year, especially with Dalvin Cook out. You would expect they throw a decent amount, and the Steelers secondary isn't great. And Justin Jefferson has been absolutely balling out over the last couple weeks, stepped up in a big way with Adam Thielen out. Again, they lost that game, but Justin Jefferson did what you would expect him to do when the other star goes out. So I expect him to have another big week this week. Comes in at number 4 for me in Week 14. Number 3, staying in that game again, is going to be Deontay Johnson going up against the Vikings here, who are 31st in the league against wide receivers. And, this is another guy that's almost matchup proof. His floor is basically, being a flex option at this point. And so if that's the case, then he needs to be in there every week. But we see him get so many targets from Big Ben. Big Ben always talks in the media about how good he thinks Deontay Johnson is. I think he's going to have a big week here against a bad secondary. He comes in at number 3.
All right. You know how I feel about Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson. They're two of the best receivers in the league. No doubt they'll have massive games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Pittsburgh Steelers, respectively. Deontay Johnson, I'm not as big on him as you are. I see you tend to favor Deontay Johnson, but I could see him having a big game. Just a matter of, is Big Ben going to be able to get him the ball? And you think he will? It is a very favorable matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. So we will see how that plays out. And that puts us here at number 2.
All right, number 2 this week going to be Devante Adams going up against Chicago. Pretty much anytime Devontae is healthy, he's somewhere here in the top 3 because we know he's going to see a bunch of targets. He has one of the greatest quarterbacks, if not the most talented quarterback to ever play football, throwing him the ball. And, Aaron Rodgers showed that toe injury isn't going to be a problem, and going up against a team that Aaron Rodgers owns. And they're playing in Lambeau, you bet your ass that Devonte Adams is going to be a big part of this win. So he comes in at number 2 for me. Number 1 in Week 14 is going to be number 1 in all of fantasy football in terms of receivers. That is Cooper Kupp going up against Arizona, who is 9th in terms of fantasy football against wide receivers. And this is one where, again, I think Arizona's going to get up. They're going to have to pass. It doesn't even have to be, we just saw against the Jaguars, Cooper Kupp absolutely went off, and they were dominating that entire game. The Rams don't even have to be down for Kupp to produce. I expect them to be down. Kupp should have a monster day here.
All right, there's Jeffe's top 10 wide receivers for Week 14. Real quick, summarize them for me.
Yeah, that's going to be number 10, DeAndre Hopkins against the Rams. Number 9, Elijah Moore against the Saints. Number 8, Keenan Allen against the Giants. 7 is Terry McLaurin against the Dallas Cowboys. Number 6, Tyree Kill against the Raiders. Coming into the top 5 is going to be Stephon Diggs against the Bucks. Number 4, Justin Jefferson against the Steelers. Number 3, Deontay Johnson against the Vikings. Number 2, Devonte Adams against the Bears. And number 1 is Cooper Kupp against the Cardinals.
All right, there you go. We got about 7 or 8 minutes left on this episode. We're quickly running out of time. So we're going to hit my surefire stardom sit-ems real quick. If you have anything to add, feel free to hop in here. And we'll start with my must-start running backs. We've already talked about Saquon Barkley, Alexander Madison. I'd also like to throw in Javonte Williams against the Detroit Lions. Javonte seems to have taken over the Denver backfield with Melvin Gordon out, and he's actually questionable this week. Williams could come up with a full load, which only furthers his fantasy value. Regardless, I like him this week against the Detroit Lions. I also have, and this isn't in there for a must start, this is all contingent on if Alvin Kamara is coming back. Obviously, if Kamara is back in there, do not play Mark Ingram. But if Kamara is out yet again, he is still questionable, although it appears he will be back in the starting lineup. Mark Ingram should be more than capable of having a pretty decent fantasy game this week against the New York Jets. No other team in the entire NFL has given up more rushing touchdowns on the year than the New York Jets. So the Saints, even though they're struggling with finding a quarterback capable of throwing the ball, Ingram will have a very high volume that should turn out well for fantasy owners. That's if Kamara's not back. You got anything you want to say about those two real quick?
Yeah, I think Javonte Williams is a good one. Obviously, I didn't put him in my top 10 because of the Ingram thing. If Ingram's back, I think that gets capped a little bit, but I think it's clear that he's a very good back. Should net you at least a good flex option territory. But if Gordon's out, then he's probably going to be a top 10 back this week. And yeah, if Alvin Kamara's out, Mark Ingram, a must start.
Heard that. We'll keep it with the must starts. We're going to flip over to the wide receivers. I have 3 guys on my list. The first one is Jarvis Landry against the Baltimore Ravens. The Browns are coming off of a bye. They're getting healthier. They're ready to make that push towards a playoff Jarvis Landry will have to step up and be a Pro Bowl caliber player that he was last year. The previous 2 games, he put up 18 and 14 fantasy points respectively. Baltimore happens to have one of the worst passing defenses in the league, and now they're dealing with injuries in their secondary. The field is wide open for Landry to have a huge game. I also like Brandon Ayuk at Cincinnati. I thought for sure Ayuk would have a huge game last week, and I was left a little disappointed with a 3-reception, 55-yard, 8.5-point fantasy performance. With Debo out yet again, Ayuk is bound to have a breakout game, right? Another favorable matchup against a weak Bengals secondary. I'm starting him again this week. My last guy on here, no-brainer, CeeDee Lamb against a Washington football team. CeeDee Lamb has proven to be a superstar in the making. Last game, he came away with 7 receptions on 13 targets for 89 yards and 19 fantasy points. This week, they're up against a divisional foe, Washington football team, a team that has given up a league-leading 26 passing touchdowns on the year. Look for CD to have another big game this week. You want to talk about any one of those 3 guys?
Yeah, CD, a great pick. He's even with all 3 of the star wide receivers there for the Cowboys playing. CD is balling out, and he looks fabulous. Even the catch that didn't count, that crazy catch that you only wish he would have been able to catch in bounds. He's been phenomenal. So I think he's somebody that you have to start. Jarvis and Donovan Peoples-Jones, for that matter, for the Browns, 2 guys that I think could both have pretty good games with all the injuries there for the Ravens. So I like all those picks.
Yeah, I was actually going to throw Donovan Peoples-Jones in there too, but I went with Landry just because he's the bigger guy there. So that's why I went with him. A few more minutes left. Well, let's go to the must-sits, guys, to avoid. I'm going to start here, and I know you'll agree with this one. Devin Singletary against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This Bills offense has been struggling. The run game is non-existent. Last game against the Patriots, Singletary led the backfield with 10 carries for only 36 yards in a game where you had to run the ball because the conditions were so bad. This week, the Bills are heading to Tampa, where the best run defense resides. Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Matt Breida should be on nobody's starting list this week. I'd also like to throw in Tevin Coleman against the New Orleans Saints. Last week, Coleman took the bulk of the workload for the Jets backfield, carrying the ball 11 times for 58 yards, catching 3 balls on 4 targets, and winding up with a total of 10 fantasy points. This week, the Jets are up against a top 5 Saints run defense, holding running backs to under 100 yards a game. Bad matchup here. Avoid Coleman. I would also like to throw in Ezekiel Elliott to this list. I said last week I like Tony Pollard, but to sit Ezekiel Elliott, and you know what? I was right. Zeke finished the day with 13 carries, only 45 yards, and a measly 6.5 fantasy points with a tough matchup against the Washington football team this week. I think it will be the same. Pollard leads that backfield now. Zeke's riding the bench for me. And then the last couple guys I have here is Carlos Hyde and James Robinson at Tennessee. Carlos Hyde and James Robinson pretty much split the backfield evenly last game. The only difference between the two was Hyde had 1 more carry and just happened to get into the end zone. Tennessee is one of the better teams in the league against running backs, so I definitely don't like either one of these guys, and I'm very skeptical on James Robinson if you're considering playing him as well. And any comments on any of those guys?
The Bills running backs, what keeps running through my head is like week to week, you don't know who to play. Like I feel most confident with Matt Breida, the way he's looked in that offense, but even, Devin Singletary had a big run against the Patriots. Like you don't know what you're going to get week to week. I mean, Zach Moss, not against the Patriots, but the week before was a healthy scratch. So week to week, you don't know what you're getting. I wouldn't play any of them any week. And the Jags running backs, you're definitely not playing because of the way they keep, I don't know why they keep taking touches away from Robinson, but they do. And Carlos Hyde is kind of messing that whole situation up.
Yep, true that. All right, couple guys for the wide receivers, must-sit wide receivers for Week 14 fantasy football. The first, I'm going to start here with Russell Gage for the Atlanta Falcons against the Carolina Panthers. This Falcons offense has been extremely stagnant this season, although Gage had a huge game last week with 11 receptions on 12 targets for 130 yards and 25 points. I think this Carolina secondary steps up, shuts him down this week. Carolina gives up only 176 yards a game through the air. That's second best in the league by 19 points on average. That's pretty significant. So I'd be very cautious starting Gage or any Falcons player other than your boy, Cordarrelle Patterson. The other guy I would like to throw in here, and this one's kind of questionable because this is all speculative here. That's Jamar Chase against the San Francisco 49ers. And that's not just because of Jamar Chase here. It's actually because of T. Higgins getting all the love from Joe Burrow as of late. Last game alone, T. Higgins had 9 catches, 14 targets, 138 yards, 1 touchdown, and 35 fantasy points. That marks the second 100-yard game T. Higgins had, back-to-back 100-yarders, and that's just taken away from Jamar Chase. So with T taking the reins and a tough matchup against the Niners this week, I'd consider sitting Jamar Chase if another receiver or flex spot on your squad provides a better matchup value. Any comment on either one of those guys?
Jamar Chase has been so disappointing for how he started the year, especially, the drop pass that happened. He hasn't been dropping a bunch of passes. I know that was a thing in training camp and preseason was he was dropping the balls, but I mean that was a huge drop that he had against the Chargers, especially the fact that he drops it and it just happens to fall back into the hands of the defender for an interception. Just all bad. T. Higgins seems to be getting favored, and I haven't watched the Bengals games while T. Higgins is doing this, but I would assume what's happening is that teams are trying to take away Jamar Chase, which is opening up things for T. Higgins, and it's obviously been working because Bengals have been struggling with Jamar Chase not doing anything. So I'm right there with you. T. Higgins, I would definitely be starting, and Jamar Chase, somebody that I wouldn't play if I didn't have to.
All right, that's all we have for you guys this week. We appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully, Jeffe and I were able to provide you with some insight to help get you an advantage in your fantasy league. If you're looking to take your team to the next level, we offer some premium exclusive content you can only find on horsemansports.com. Head over there, check it out. As always, special shout out to our WUBI Live listeners for tuning in. You can catch the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast and Fantasy Central on WUBI Live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The WUBI Live app is available for download in your app store, or just simply visit WUBI.live where you can stream over your internet browser. Next week is the playoffs, baby. Good luck to you all this weekend. For Jeffe, I am Zach. We will see you right back here next week.